Time to be productive for once. Well, as productive as you can be with a small YouTube channel making videos that are entirely based on opinion with bits of fact and research thrown into it. Let's be real here for a second. Blizzard does not even know I exist, let alone care about what I have to say. But that does not stop me from sitting down to work on videos and talking about things I find interesting. And with me breaking my streak of not complaining about the game for a week by shamelessly throwing shade on Mercy one-tricks all over the world, I think it's time to think of some possible solutions as well. Let me make something very clear though. When I talk about possible fixes, that does not actually incorporate fixes. It would suggest that I knew better than a team of 100 developers how to do their job properly, which is obviously not the case. But for some reason, talking about fixes is more popular than talking about improvements. Complaining, funnily enough, is also very popular, which fits right into my niche. But as we all know, this channel is all about appealing to the YouTube gods because, you know, I like eating bread over, well, nothing, so that's what we're gonna do. Though, to be honest, I never understood the fascination that viewers have with the YouTubers anyway. I mean, what makes our opinion more valid than yours? The fact that we convinced a bunch of people to listen to our nonsense on a regular basis? I mean, I'm a Masters player for crying out loud. Well, technically I'm borderline platinum, but at least I get to keep my shiny GM badge that I worked so hard for at the start of the season for about 2 hours. Decay for the win! And that is a beautiful segue into an actual issue that we're facing. Players only competing as long as they need to so they get the best possible reward at the end of the season that reflects the highest level of skill that they can display. Isn't that kind of sad though? Having so many players be fed up with comp that all they do is play to their career high, run into some throwers, and then lay low until the next season starts? Well, how do we work on that issue? Obviously by improving the experience for those who want to participate in competitive play, and this is where we get to number 1 on our list after an unnecessarily long intro with a pointless amount of context. I mean, these videos don't reach 10 minutes unless you put some work into them, so let's get right into the meat of this. Number 1, more competitive game modes. Now this might initially look like it's a point arguing in favor of variety, working against burnout by offering more game modes that exist within the realm of competitive play, which are usually taken more seriously than any casual game modes. But the more important point here is to drive away players who don't actually care for the core competitive experience of Overwatch. The basic 6v6s that we know and love. Jeff has mentioned on occasion that he regrets even implementing gold guns because it drives away from the idea of ranked being a place only for those competing for the sake of competition. I've made the argument in the past that as a developer you can only get away with not offering rewards for competitive play when the game mode itself is inherently satisfying. At the time I used Rainbow Six Siege and Dirty Bomb as examples. Siege offers a very satisfying competitive experience and thanks to that gets away with offering very little on the side of rewards. Dirty Bomb on the other hand is combating a lot of problems in their competitive scene from both a player base as well as a technical standpoint. I mean, how long has it been since they entered what they call open beta? 2.5 years? Glad that doesn't stop you from charging for cosmetics because that sure is a great way of monetizing an unfinished game that is subject to change. But that is besides the point. They are aware of the fact that their game still needs work, but they still want to give the players what they want, which is a competitive environment, and that's why they offer a lot of rewards for participating in it. In the case of Overwatch, all we get are gold guns for participating in a game mode that, on a regular basis, frustrates us thanks to a wonky matchmaking system, a subpar netcode, and the flavor of the month type of hero changes that mess with the players and their ratings over and over again. Now, I used to think that more compensation would be a good idea because of how unrefined rank play is in Overwatch, but I have to say, now I kinda agree with the developers. Maybe the opposite is the case. One of the biggest problems on ladder we face is the sheer amount of players who do not care for the competition, and that for a variety of reasons. But if my comment section is anything to go by, then there's a decent amount of people who just play for gold guns, and who can blame them? There isn't much in the way of customization in Overwatch besides getting these gold guns on your newly acquired skins to make yourself stand out at least a little bit. If these players had other means of acquiring competitive points to get these gold guns, then they would be less likely to participate in the standard 6v6 game mode. Hell, I wouldn't even care if the other game modes like competitive Lucio Bowl make it easier to get competitive points, and a lot of ranked players will probably agree. For those truly invested in competitive play, the gold guns are merely a bonus. We care more for a pleasant experience with players who care about playing the game properly and trying to win the game. And if we do have an urge to get a new gold gun, we can participate in these other game modes as well. So yeah, from a competitive aspect, turning FFA into a competitive game mode might be silly. There are just too many things that make it fairly unbalanced given that this game was created as a 6v6 experience, but it can still be fun and it can still be used as another means of acquiring competitive points. And that could be the first step in improving the matchmaking quality for the standard 6v6 comp. There'll be one less type of player to be likely to appear in this game mode that should not be there to begin with. Now that is obviously not the only type of player out there. We have already figured out that you can't just ban everyone who does not play according to an unwritten set of rules rules that would force them to adhere to the standards of competitive play. So we should rather think about how we handle them. In the case of those who just want gold guns, it's not their fault that there's no other way of acquiring them. So rather than demonizing them for not taking the matches too seriously and rather just playing for cosmetics, we should offer more ways of getting these cosmetics. And by that, we slowly but surely create an environment that is only attractive to those who actually care for the core competitive experience. Again, there are more types of players that need to be taken care of essentially, but that's not something I have any ideas for at the time, so we'll leave it at that and possibly come back to that subject at another point in the future. Number 2, matchmaking tweaks. Now we have already established that a lot of the perceived matchmaking problems actually have to do with players, their mindsets and their attitudes, rather than an actual matchmaking mishap that will put a player who's not skilled enough into a high elo match. However, there are still numerous problems with it. Gold players competing with diamonds just so the game can even out the team's averages, disregarding the actual disadvantage of having a player in your team who is multiple divisions below your own, even if you get one player who's rated higher to balance it out. But something that is a big issue is the way the matchmaker puts players together who main the same roles. I used to advocate in favor of the system actually creating teams that are about as functional as possible, because it was my experience that I rarely ever ran into teams with too many support mates or whatever. But if we take anecdotal evidence into the equation, as if that is any better than just my opinion, it seems like a massive problem in low elo that players are constantly grouped up with others who all want to play DPS. And even in my own matches in high master up into low GM, I've started to notice how often I run into the same problem. Teams with 3 Mercy 1 tricks or just 4 support mains period. While I haven't been competing a lot myself recently, I have been spending a lot of time watching streams, and yes, it happens over and over again to a variety of high ranked players. Now obviously we would love a system that religiously matches us in teams of 2 DPS, 2 support and 2 tank mains, because that would give you the most flexibility to pull off a variety of different compositions, and that at a decent level of proficiency. What I think we have to ask ourselves is, where do these problems come from? Now I obviously don't have any way to answer that definitively, so my opinion will have to suffice once again, but feel free to let me know your own take on the issue down in the comment section below. From what I gather, it seems like a lot of players on low elo are under the impression that the only way to rank up is by playing DPS, which is absolute nonsense. I mean, back in Season 2 I climbed out of Platinum into Diamond to then reach High Master in Season 3 already, only because I decided to get really good on Ana and Zenyatta. If you know how to play your hero properly, it does not even matter what you play. What matters is just how well you play it, not only because the matchmaker will acknowledge your improvement, but also because you can make a significantly bigger impact on the outcome of your matches. But fact is still that many low elo players believe in the DPS only mentality. Additionally, a lot of players also believe that DPS heroes are simply more fun to play than anything else. Now obviously it is not Blizzard's fault that some guys on the internet popularized the legend of the DPS climb, but what they can do is trying to make tank and support roles more appealing, which they are obviously doing, or at least trying. Now that was a very long and convoluted way of saying that the matchmaker might need some tweaks to avoid pairing players of vastly different skill levels together, but the role imbalance we see in every elo stems more from the generalized idea of the community that DPS is the only way to rank up. When it comes to high elo, obviously we are currently dealing with a metric truckload of boosted Mercy 1 tricks who were Platinum in the previous season but seized the moment of her being broken to get into a high rank. The only thing I can say here is that something is very obviously wrong with the way the SR distribution is handled for some heroes, and that is something that needs to be addressed as soon as possible in my opinion. And lastly on our list, number 3, choose a direction. Now this one very specifically goes out to the dev team. Obviously everything proposed today is something that the devs would have to decide whether they want to do any of it or not, but this point more than anything else is very important in my opinion. There was a post a while ago with Jeff speaking of some of the problems they face as developers, how sometimes it's scary to face the community with the countless voices that yell at them from all directions, and how we as players assume that they only do one thing or another when in reality they care about the entirety of the game. Something that may seem very noble initially, to me only further reinforced something I criticized for a while. The fact that the developers refuse to pick a side, choose a direction, find some sort of cohesion in the design of Overwatch. The basic gist is that, essentially, they stated that they care about every aspect of the game. They care for the sound a button makes in the menu, they care about the quick players as much as they care about the competitive players, and they also care about the growing esports scene. And that, in my opinion, is horrible. I mean, inconsistency is something that very obviously aggravates the community community very often, not knowing whether or not they're going to have a decent set of matches in comp today, for example, not knowing if their main hero will still be viable next season, worrying about which heroes are broken next. What I don't understand personally is why the idea of bouncing from top to bottom is such a foreign concept to the developers. So much about Overwatch just feels like a participation reward, and it's kinda silly. I mean, eliminations are not the amount of kills you got, it's the amount of kills you participated in. Just damage a guy before someone else finishes him off and you can easily get your shiny gold medals. They try so hard for all the heroes to be viable in every level of play that it really messes with the balance of the game over and over again. Why do you constantly cut the players slack rather than saying, well no, you're not gonna have a fun time on this hero unless you actually learn how to play them properly. Pharah, as an example, was viable in the hands of a player who dedicated themselves to learning how to make the most of their kit. But that was not enough, because the devs want someone who lacks any level of skill whatsoever to be just as effective on Pharah, so they gave her the ability to stay in the air indefinitely. And suddenly everyone east and west of Platinum would stomp their way through the ranks on Pharah as long as they don't encounter somebody who actually knows how to land a shot. It's kinda ridiculous. Why can't some heroes remain niche picks that only shine in certain situations? Why can't some heroes only be viable in the hands of a skilled player? I mean, you attach difficulty levels to them yourself. I just can't wrap my head around that. I guess all this boils down to is that I just want them to pick a side. Do you want to balance for casuals, for competitive players, or for esports? Trying to appeal to all of them only makes you appeal to nobody at all. And I mean, if we reach points where shareholders and analysts see the growth of the game as an esports hindered because of how many community complaints are piling up, I feel you gotta start thinking about what's best for it in the long run. But hey, what do I know? I'm just some guy on the internet with a half-baked opinion on things that I probably should not comment on, but I do it anyway. I know these longer videos are not for everyone, but I try my best to fill them with what I consider to be reasonably meaningful discussion and insight. You know, the watch time is good for my channel, and the mid-roll does help keeping the bread on the table. I'll try to come up with some shorter ones this week, something that is a little bit easier to digest. But until then, thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to drop me a like on your way out if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want to see more, and I hope to see you all next time.